Well, hello, we are going outside today. I'm gonna do what's really a quick spring garden tour, and this is early spring. So even though we are in May now in Iowa, we have been having a really cold and long spring. It's been wet, which is good. I'm so glad for the moisture, but it means everything's a little delayed. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to see where things are at here in my small corner of Southeast Iowa and some of the projects I'm working on. And I think I'm gonna also end up replacing some hydrangeas that I kind of wanna change up in the front. But I thought, let's do a little bit of a garden tour. Going from vegetable garden, you know my heart is in vegetable gardening. I love it. So we're gonna go from that to maybe a little bit of the perennial borders, where they're at, because guess what? They're behind too, as everything is. So I thought, let's start out here in the garden and see what's going on. So we're at the north edge of my property, which is where I got my #1 man beside me, my supervisor. As always, Mr. Kip is just following me and helping me. But these are my vegetable raised beds, and I did raised beds quite a few years ago. If you've been following, you know I loved raised beds and still love them because I find they're super easy. So raised bed, I have a post on raised beds you can read. For years I've been saying, I love it because you start with the best growing medium, which for me has always been 60% topsoil, 30% of a good organic compost, and 10% of a soil lightener, which is vermiculite or perlite. Either one works. And what that does is create the beginnings of a great ecosystem. And then the important thing about all of these raised beds, they're never tilled. Instead, all the weed seeds, anything that is disease or anything inside of them is suppressed down by layers. And when I say layers, I mean every year I top them with maybe a good compost, which I'll show here up there, but it's only suppressed. You never turn the soil, meaning you don't break up that beautiful ecosystem, all those good bacteria in the soil. You let them grow and be beautiful. So here I have my garlic. I have both soft neck and hard neck. Hard neck is wonderful because it has bigger heads, it's more flavorful, but it does not store as long in the winter. So I grow soft neck for more longer term storage, and then hard neck over here for, you have to use it up a little bit quicker. It lasts maybe 3 months, where soft neck can usually last 6 or more months. Over on the other side here, I have shallots growing, my winter perennial onions that have been on the farm and on Mom's farm across the road for generations. I mean, great grandma had these, grandma had these, mom had these. And then all my asparagus, which is really starting to come up well. You can see. So I say this a lot, but with asparagus, you want to remember, if it's the size of a lead pencil or smaller, you don't use it. Do you remember what lead pencils are? That's because means it's coming from a root system that still needs to work a little bit harder and get bigger before you really should start taxing it, which taxing it means when you cut this, you're taxing the root system. So when they get this big, that's nice and thick, I will take that one in. And you can see this is the best time to weed your asparagus, is when it is not bushy and large. Because after June, when I stop picking this is all a mass and you can't really see the weeds. So weed it now. Kip just wants the asparagus, he loves it. Rhubarb, so ready. Look at all this beautiful rhubarb. This is mostly my red varieties, my Canada Red. Just pull it out, beautiful. And I've been using it already in the kitchen. You've been seeing my coffee cake crisp, whatever it is. As we move on down, you are really gonna see some fun stuff. This is where the green happens. So we have all the lettuce right now. I planted this, it's been close to 3 weeks probably ago, and I had to cover it a lot because it was getting cold, but look how well it's doing, and it really has grown. So we have the crisp mint, we have the seed I save every year for my grandma's, which I'm pretty sure it's the same variety as the one growing next to it, which is a French variety. But this is the seed I save, and since grandma had it, I still save it. Butter crunch, of course. We have the Merlot. I love the dark, look at those beautiful colors. You just can't get things like this unless you grow them fresh. It's just all so good. We have spinach, we have arugula, lots of different radish, and then down further, they're not up yet, but are my carrots, beets, and Swiss chard. It's all coming. So the bed beside here is going to be my hot peppers. I grow lots of hot peppers for canning, for cooking, whatever it is. They're all gonna be in this bed. And then down here we have the cold crops of cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli. So you can see the Chinese cabbage are looking great. The tender sweet cabbage are really starting to grow. All these poles are left from when I was having to cover them and it was windy, so I would weight them down, all my blankets. But this is all beautiful. We have broccoli, we have cauliflower, some of my favorites. Now, the one question I always get is, what do you think the question is? Caleb, what do you do with all that? No, I use it and I do eat it. So one, I am a true believer in greens, greens, greens. You need to eat, the majority of your plate should be greens. So I am eating so much cabbage, so much broccoli and cauliflower because it's in the the same family and has all those great health benefits. But also I make sauerkraut. I'm hoping to do a video on that this year. I hope. Home fermented sauerkraut. Not only is the flavor so good, the health benefits are great. It's delicious and it's great to use. So I do use the salt. I do can with it. I do love to make pickled curry cauliflower, can it. So good. So I will be doing that with all this. And yeah, I use it, I promise you. And then the bed right here is going to be my tomatoes. Now I rotate beds every year. So tomatoes aren't in the same spot for at least 4 years, which is important because then hopefully the fungal diseases that live in the soil aren't there. This one you can see are already topped with some good compost. I got this out of my compost pile. And do you see how beautiful that is? It does not have a foul smell, which a good compost never should. That means it's fully composted and it's really breaking down into a nice, fine, beautiful, kind of soil-like quality, and that's what you want, but it's compost, so it has lots of great nutrients in it. So the bed for my peppers will get topped yet in this also, but this is for my tomatoes, which here in Iowa, our last spring frost date is usually around May 12 or May 15, so here soon I will be able to plant these. And then hopefully we'll be out of the fear of frost. That's the hope, guys. The grass right now in the spring, super green. I did organically put some fertilizer on it a couple weeks ago. I brought you along for that. But what I do right now, this is no joke, you can see my bucket here. This is when I'm going around and looking for, this is my tool for getting out dandelions, and that's what all those are. So I always get asked in videos, what do you do to get out your dandelions? Do you spray? No, I don't spray, but what I do is every year, especially in the spring when the ground is moist and you can get in there, because I want to get as much root as I can, I go in and I look for these dandelions and I go and pull them out. This is beyond a labor of love. It's intense, it's a lot of work, but guess what? That's what yards are. We do things like this because why? Because we love our yards, because we want them to be beautiful. We want them to be healthy for, there he is. Look at that. My goodness, but look, in the spring you can get so much of the root, which dandelion is one that if you leave even a small bit of root, yeah, it will come back. So you want to get as much as you can. And then I make sure to press them back in as much as I can, and then even stomp on it to make sure that grass really adheres. But here's even a small one. So this is what I'm always doing in the spring, is walking around, pulling out little dandelions. I have a bucket full. Do not compost these. So things like Creeping Charlie, which is what this is, and dandelions, you don't want compost because those seeds, you just don't want them to live. So we do not compost those. But instead here you can see now, we're coming up into one of my favorite perennial borders at my house. I have some pretty exciting stuff over at Mom's too in a perennial border, but this one is one I've been working on for quite a few years. And this year again, I'm gonna revamp it somewhat, but I'm really loving it. So early spring, I've been taking out some small green velvet boxwood, like this one. That one's left down there. I had a whole row of them in front, and they were really just starting to they were impeding too much. This isn't deep enough to have that many boxwood. So I kept the Green Mountain ones here in the back that will get taller, be more structural. And then up here in front, I just want some more perennials and have the ones I have, give them more room to grow. So you can see I have lots of peonies. So these are all herbaceous peonies, and they're just now emerging from the ground. They die back to the ground. And soon they're gonna be full of blooms. It's surprising how quickly it happens, early June usually. And these are really early fern leaf peonies. So these are from a grandma and a great grandma. And I've split them and have numerous ones now growing down this whole perennial border. And they bloom super early. And they have just a really fun fern-like foliage. And they're just, I love those. So we also have tree peonies coming up. Look at this guy. Tree peonies have huge, massive blooms. They're beautiful, and they're one of my favorite peonies. You can see here they have more of a bark-like trunk, and their canopy is almost like an umbrella shape usually, as opposed to an herbaceous peony comes out from a full bush kind of from the ground. So it's getting to that time of year where I can start setting up, hopefully, my bird baths again. I need to clean this one out from being stored all winter, but you can see a perennial border isn't necessarily gorgeous in the winter, but things are now really starting to emerge. We're getting some of that green growth. I need to trim this rose. So I have 2 climbing roses here. They're called Above and Beyond. To me, it's my favorite climbing rose. Profuse blooming, it's easy, it's beautiful. Japanese beetles love it, which I hate, but that's okay. We live on. But you can see things are really happening here. I have now weeding I need to do. So you guys always think, or ask me actually, you always say, Caleb, you don't have weeds. Yes, Caleb has weeds. That's a weed. All these little things are weeds. So I've not edged or weeded this yet this year. And so that's what I need to do now. I want to bring it out just a few inches more, maybe like 6 inches to a foot out. Give it a little bit more of an edge and a little bit more room for these perennials to grow because I've brought out some of the allium so they have more room, things like that. I think we often with gardening get really stuck on, I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to plant things and then not be in the right spot, which you do need to look at tags. You need to look at sun requirements. You need to look at water requirements. You need to look at soil. But you know what? You also need to look at the fun part of it, which is planting the things and growing the things. And you know what? I am still in a place where sometimes things aren't in the right spot. They get too close, they get too crowded because I like to jam in too much. And that's okay. So I am still in places where I'm actually going through and moving things like I did this spring with all of those boxwood, and it's gonna work out. Flowers and gardening is forgiving. I will show this whole perennial edge and border here in a couple months, or actually just in a month, because you are gonna see so many blooms. But what I want to show now is over here more in the formal area behind it. You may remember that this spring I did a video on preparing and getting ready this bed, which what I did was I just took a mower, a push mower, and I mowed off all of the perennial growth from the last season. And why I did that was it just really mulched it back into the soil. So now all of the allium, all of the sage, everything is just coming up. This to me is kind of my first entry into a little bit more of a natural perennial garden that does well with drought tolerance. So a lot of these plants, the allium, the sage, they all do pretty well with drier conditions and the harsh elements that are out here. So it will fill in a lot here over the summer and you're gonna see it really change. And that to me is super exciting. So what I think we need to do now is load up some hydrangea, get to the front, and I'll talk about kind of what I'm revamping maybe up there in front of the front porch, and actually plant something. I'm in the mood to plant. The weather today is feeling good, and it's never a bad day to plant something. So we just drove up to the front of the house here by the front porch, and this is, again, I think I say this on every part of my yard, this is an area I'm working on this year, because guess what? A garden's never done being worked on. And up here what I'm doing is kind of re-edging it eventually, but also I have been redoing the bed kind of along the front border, which you know, and I thought we can talk about kind of what I'm trying to do here and what I'm really working on. So this is the front porch. Obviously I use it a lot in the summer, come out and sit on it a lot. I'm just beginning to bring some plants out from winter storage. Up here what I have are, I know, lo and behold, boxwood. So I have wintergreen boxwood, which are a little bit of an older boxwood. They don't have the dark green glossy leaf, but they have to me a really nice color, and they're just a little bit smaller leaf too than a lot of the newer varieties. I like them. And a couple of them have been here for a long time. The rest I filled in and they're starting to grow in. What I have behind them are little lime hydrangeas. I'm gonna admit I'm not in love with the shape of the little limes. I think in the right application they can work well. I find they're very uneven here. You can see they haven't even leafed out fully yet, they're just beginning. So I'm gonna be replacing these with Bobo, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The row behind them, that green foliage you see, that is all Mount Everest allium. So that is those beautiful big balls of allium, but white ones. So Mount Everest are white. So these really work well up here and kind of offset the White House, and just, I don't know, they really always are fun because to me they get tall and they look like they're dancing behind everything. So around the corner here is where I'm really been working on, you can see now, re-edging. So I'm taking out all these bullet edgers. I'm not a huge fan. You can see what happens is the grass, usually our mowers just slowly push in the edgers, even if you try not to. They sink. You have to lift them every so often. Grass starts growing in between the cracks, gets over into the flower bed. Until I could do maybe someday a good limestone curbing as the edging, I'm giving it just a hard edge with my half moon edger that I show a lot. So up here, I'm kind of going to have a cloud boxwood moment someday with the front walk. And in front here, I gave myself more room because I want to do a border of some great perennials. So I'm going to do some more, I think Helen von Stein. You can see one lowly pot, but there'll be more. Helen von Stein lambs here, I think I went in front. And then just some, I think, Nepeta behind it, just to have that pretty kind of foliage and color behind it, just so it gives me some nice texture, some nice kind of muted color, and then I will mulch everything. So I've been waiting to mulch everything until I really have it planted. I just picked up the sod, you know, this spring here early on, and I'm starting to put some landscape lighting and transfer some wires some places so they're still exposed. But you can really now see more, it just softens the corner of my walkway, and it really now works well. So what we're focusing on though right now is all these boxwood. So I'm going to remove the little limes. I'm going to put in the bobo, which bobo, I'm going to show you, they're still dormant, which I love. I love if I can plant things before they're leafed out. It's just less stress. So you can see here, these are just beginning to leaf out. So it's a great time to plant them before they really start their push. What I love about bobo, they get 4 to 5 foot tall and wide. I have these in front of mom's house too. They like full sun, they can take a little bit of shade. They're very upright in their growth habit. They're very strong and sturdy stems, so they don't flop over with their blooms, which I find the limelights or the little limes can. So I really like their growth pattern and habit on these, and I think they're gonna work really well up here. Some people feel like they're overused because, because they're used a lot. A lot of growers use them and a lot of landscapers. That's because they perform well. So in the right spot, I think they totally have a purpose. So whenever I get ready to plant something, you guys see this on stories a lot. I do a lot of the same process and I do a lot of the same components, but I always think it's important to maybe stress certain things because little tips, little tricks when we go to plant something. I know I'm wielding a knife. This means listen up. No, I'm joking. But little things can make a big difference on the longevity and the health of a plant. So I pulled out, you can see here, one of the little limes already, and I want to go over what we're going to do here. So this is the first one in a row of 5. And what I'm doing is, you can see it there. I pulled it out and you just see a nice hole. Hydrangea roots honestly are not too thick, so they're pretty easy to pull out and to put a new one in. And I do admit I have great soil up here. You can see that beautiful black soil. So I pulled out one of the bobos to show you, and you can see its root structure is pretty good. Now, some people don't agree with this. I think it's important to stress the roots slightly. That just means to break them up. Just because see how they're encircling and getting tight around the pot? So when they're growing in a pot for a long time, which, you know, this is a pot, they're growing in it here, that means that their roots are starting to circle and it can be really tight. Well, it's really hard for those roots just to on their own want to start breaking out and branching out into the soil. So when you stress them slightly by scratching them up, scarifying them, whatever you like to do, sometimes even if they're really tight, like on a tree, I will take an outdoor, I call this a freezer knife because it's from like the 60s, 1960s, and it's like a frozen freezer knife. And if you want to, you can even take a sharp knife and you can even just go along and make cuts. Whatever works. This one is actually pretty simple enough that you can see I'm just breaking it up. But this is going to help those roots start having new growth. It's just like if you prune something, it's just giving them new growth and this new area now to want to branch out into, and they're just more apt to do it quicker. And that's actually a lot healthier for the plant, which is why I'm doing it. So when I put it into the hole, I do like to put kind of a starter fertilizer. There's different ones. You know me, I love a Spoma Biotone. So that's always what I'm gonna grab. It's just gonna be a good proponent to get those roots kind of in a happy place. So to me, it's super simple. It's super easy just to sprinkle it down the hole. I always have a bag with me. I will even sometimes put this, you can use it really in a lot of applications, but to me, any tree, any shrub, anything I plant, it's gonna have this down the hole. It's just some great starter to get them going. And then once I have that ready to go, we can just plant it up. The next important thing I always try to stress, you don't want to plant something too deep. So if you plant it too deep, it can be a lot more prone to suffocating at its crown, or it can rot. So instead what we're going to do is plant it no deeper than it currently is, and I will even slightly plant a little bit higher out of the ground because anytime you displace soil like this and dig a hole, it's going to settle slightly. So once this plant is sitting here over the summer, once it's raining on it, all that soil will slightly settle and it will go a little deeper. So planting it a little higher now will give you a lot better outcome later on. Okay, you can see I've planted this one. The soil's pushed up to it. I will put on fresh mulch here soon, but I want to get all this stuff planted. And I like to work in my beds as much as I can before I put down the mulch. That way when you're planting things, you don't have to get dirt and mulch mixed up together. And so you can see here, it's no deeper than it was. And now all these little buds, see all those? They're gonna leaf out. It will bloom later on, July, can't wait. So I'm gonna plant down the row and you'll see how quick this can be. So you can see it really doesn't take that long, especially hydrangeas are shallow rooted. So taking out the older ones, even though they're a few years old, really is no big deal. So I do need to go through now and water all these new Bobo. Bobo are paniculata, panicle hydrangea, which to me is one of the easiest ones. If you feel like hydrangeas don't work for you and you have a sunny area, try one in the panicle family. They're super easy. They have more of a cone-shaped flower that comes to a point, but they're usually profuse bloomers. They're easy to get to rebloom. All those things are just super easy. So these I do need to water, and usually on a smaller sized shrub like this, if it's in a number 1, a number 2, or a number 3 size container, I'll water it about 3 gallons each. And then throughout the summer until it's established, when it gets dry, I will make sure to water it. I'm gonna keep working. There's always things to do. And I hope this gets you excited to be out in the garden. As always, check my website, wyseguide.com, for tips, for tricks. But also when you share these videos, it just helps me so much. And it means so much to me to see your comments, your thoughts, your own gardens on what you're doing. That's all what it's about. We all garden in our own way, and that's the fun part. So until next time, happy gardening.